There's a certain kind of silence that screams. Not the kind that follows an argument, not the Cold War of slammed doors and sharp words. No, this one was softer, more suffocating. A silence that lived in the spaces between us. It didn't shout. It whispered. And somehow it hurt more that he still came home every night. Still wrapped his arms around me in bed. Still asked how my day was, but something was missing in his eyes. As if the man who once saw me like I was a sunrise now looked at me through a fogged window, unsure of what he was seeing, or if he wanted to see it at all. That I tried to hold on to the routine like rituals could save us. Morning coffee with too much sugar, his favorite. Friday nights with old records playing. But even the songs we used to sing along to felt different now. Off-key. Hollow. I in the mirror, I began to question myself. Was I enough? Was I still the woman he chose or just the one he settled into? I never asked out loud because what if he told me? His thoughts, she used to make me feel weightless, now every smile I force feels like a betrayal. Not to her. To the lie I'm living that there's someone else. Not like her. Not with the same history. Not with the same quiet understanding of who I am when I'm broken. But newer. Simpler. A distraction that doesn't ask questions I don't want to answer. Every time I see her face, the woman I married, guilt crashes over me like waves against brittle glass. I try to stop. God knows I try. But I keep falling back into it. I've built 2 lives and I'm failing at both. And worst of all, she knows. I can see it in her eyes, but she says nothing, and that silence, that hurts more than any accusation. We sat across from each other at dinner, steam rising from the plates like ghosts. I told him about a dream I had. One where we were dancing again in the kitchen barefoot and laughing. He smiled. That sounds nice, he said. But he didn't ask what it meant. Didn't ask how I felt when I woke up. Instead he picked at his food, checked his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. That I wanted to scream. Not out of anger but desperation. I wanted to shake him and ask, where did you go? And why did you take my heart with you when you left? But the words caught in my throat like glass shards. Instead, I cleared the table. Washed the dishes. Pretended the tears in my eyes were from the steam. His thoughts again. I wish she would yell. I wish she'd throw something. I wish she'd demand to know the truth because maybe then I could finally say it. But she doesn't. And I can't. Because if I do, everything falls apart. Everything I built. Everything we were. And maybe I deserve that. But I'm too much of a coward to set the fire myself. Nights turned colder. Even with our bodies close. We touched, but not really. We kissed, but only with our mouths, never our souls. And I realized we had become strangers in familiar skin. The ache was unbearable. Not from the betrayal I couldn't prove, but from the love I couldn't feel anymore. I watched him fall asleep and wondered if he dreamt of someone else. If her name tasted sweeter than mine in his mind. If he thought of her when he whispered, I love you. And still I said nothing because saying something meant the illusion would shatter. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't ready for the truth. Something was shifting though. In the air. In the way he lingered by the door before leaving. In the way he avoided my gaze when I said, be safe. A storm was coming that I could feel it in my bones. In my breath. In the way my heart skipped when his phone lit up at midnight, and he turned it face down without reading it. Something was about to break. And when it did, there would be no turning back. They say some loves are written in the stars. Ours felt like it had been carved into the fabric of fate, deliberate, divine, and entirely ours. I met him on a rain-soaked afternoon, the kind where the clouds hang low and heavy, like the sky is holding its breath. He held an umbrella over my head as I struggled with my groceries, smiling like we'd known each other in another life. Maybe we had. From that moment on, everything changed. He was gentle. Almost too gentle for this world. The kind of man who remembered the names of flowers, who left me notes on the mirror that said things like, your smile makes this house a home. He would dance with me in the kitchen with no music playing. We spoke in whispers like lovers afraid to wake a sleeping world. Every touch was soft. Every look lingered. Every word felt like poetry written just for me. We moved into a modest home with creaky floors and windows that groaned when the wind pressed against them. But to us it was a palace. He worked hard, long hours at a job he never talked much about. Said it was numbers mostly and meetings with the boss. I didn't pry. I trusted him. That's what love is, isn't it? a quiet surrender. And still, there were moments that didn't belong, like the time he came home late, his tie askew, the scent of expensive cologne on his jacket, not his usual brand. Or when he would stare a little too long at his phone, smiling faintly before slipping it into his pocket. There were little lies, harmless at first, just a work dinner, he'd say, or my phone died. And each time I chose not to ask more. I didn't want to stain the story we were writing. But sometimes in the silence between us I felt something shifting. Like a picture frame hanging just slightly crooked. Like the way his eyes stopped sparkling when he looked at me, even if his lips still smiled. I told myself it was just the wear of routine. The world outside has sharp edges. Maybe it had just worn him down a little. On weekends, we'd still lie in bed for hours, fingers laced, tracing stories on each other's skin. But I noticed he'd grown quieter. He stared at the ceiling more. He sighed when he thought I was asleep. I asked if everything was all right once, and he kissed my forehead with a long pause before saying, "Of course it is." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Because to admit that something was wrong would mean risking everything we'd built. And so I smiled wider, cooked his favorite meals, held him tighter at night. As if love alone could keep the shadows at bay. But love, I've learned, can be a master of illusion. Sometimes it's not the loud arguments or the slammed doors that signal the end. Sometimes, it's the way someone says, "I love you," and it lands too quietly. Sometimes, it's the weight of a glance that doesn't quite meet your own, and in those moments, I'd catch my breath, wondering what it was that flickered behind his eyes, what truth he kept sealed behind his late nights and weary smiles. I didn't know it yet, but our story had already shifted. The ink had smudged. The cracks had begun to form, and though the walls of our home still echoed with laughter, a chill had settled beneath it, something unspoken. Something waiting. It was a Tuesday. Funny how something so ordinary can carry the weight of an ending. I found the truth folded in the most mundane corner of our life. A receipt. Tucked inside his jacket pocket, carelessly forgotten. A receipt for 2 glasses of wine and a dessert we never shared. From a rooftop bar I'd never been to. Dated last Thursday. The same night he told me he was stuck in a late meeting. The same night I stayed up reheating dinner and convincing myself he was working for us. My hands shook. Not from shock, but from confirmation. The lie I'd been pretending not to see had finally turned its face toward me. Smiling. Cruel. Cold. I didn't confront him right away. I let the knowledge simmer in my chest like boiling oil, scorching everything it touched. I watched him that evening. Watched how he kissed my cheek without looking me in the eye. Watched how he hung up his coat, laughed at something on his phone, and walked right past the dinner table without noticing the second plate I had deliberately set. I asked him casually, "How was the meeting?" He smiled. Boring. That word. That lie. So effortlessly spoken. It cracked something inside me. Later that night, when he was in the shower, I did something I swore I never would. I unlocked his phone to no password change. No guilt. As if he believed I'd never dare look, or worse, that I'd stopped caring enough to try. The messages were there. Not buried. Not erased. Last night was everything. I keep thinking about your hands. She has no idea, does she? My heart didn't break. It disintegrated. Shards of love, memory, trust, all turned to dust in my chest. And when he came out, towel around his waist, humming some thoughtless tune, I didn't cry. I handed him the phone. Open. The messages glowing like wildfire. Silence, then his face fell. Not with regret, but fear. The kind of fear that doesn't come from guilt but from getting caught. "Where did you find that?" he asked. Not "I'm sorry." Not "it's not what it looks like." Just a coward's question. I laughed. A sound so foreign it startled even me. "You think I didn't feel it?" I whispered. "You think I didn't notice how you stopped seeing me?" He tried to speak. Stammered. Reached out. I stepped back like his touch was poison. "How long?" I asked, my voice breaking for the first time. He looked down. "A few months." Months. That word echoed like a gunshot. Months of lies. Of pretending. Of loving me with his body while his heart belonged to someone else. He dropped to sit on the edge of the bed, burying his face in his hands. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said. And that was the worst part. He probably didn't. It wasn't some grand betrayal, not at first. It was slow. Quiet. Like water wearing down stone. It started with a glance. A secret. A text. A lie. And then it became normal. Routine. Easier to cheat than to fix what was broken. And I let it happen. I knew something was wrong. I felt it in his distance. In my own silence. In the spaces we both refused to fill. But I stayed. I hoped. I believed. Because I was in love with a ghost of the man he used to be. I was going to tell you, he said, still not looking at me. I stared at him. This man I once wanted forever with, and I realized he wasn't mine anymore. Maybe he never truly was. I sat on the other side of the room, across the chasm that had grown between us and no screaming. No slaps. No throwing things, just two broken people sitting in the ruins of something they thought was unbreakable. The silence returned, but now it wasn't suffocating. It was final. I looked at him, and in that moment I didn't see my husband. I saw a stranger who wore his skin, and he saw a woman he could never hurt again without bleeding too. The betrayal was no longer a secret. It lived between us now. Breathed, and tomorrow something would have to be done. But tonight we sat in the aftermath. Not as lovers. Not as enemies. Just as two souls mourning a death that hadn't happened, but was already buried. The next morning the sun rose like it always did, but nothing felt the same. The light that slipped through our bedroom curtains felt sterile, no longer golden, no longer warm. Just a spotlight exposing the mess we had become. He was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, eyes vacant, shoulders slumped. The silence between us wasn't angry now. It was exhausted. I'll leave, he said, voice rough from a sleepless night. But I didn't answer. Not yet, because before anything else, he needed to hear what he broke. I walked slowly to the living room, where our photos still lined the shelves. 1,000 frozen smiles our wedding day. My eyes closed, forehead against his, the wind catching my veil like a promise in flight. A picture from Morocco, laughing over tea in the desert, faces sunburned, hands entwined like roots. They mocked me now, memories we both swore were sacred, reduced to decoration. I picked one frame up, then another, and slowly, deliberately, placed them all face down. He followed me there, standing by the doorway like a man on trial. I didn't stop loving you, he said quietly. I turned. No, I replied. You just loved someone else while loving me. You wanted both. And love doesn't live in divided hearts. He winced, because truth has a way of cutting deeper than rage. I was lonely, he tried. We stopped being us. I stared at him. And maybe if he had said this 6 months ago, it could have saved us, but now it was just too late. I didn't scream. I didn't throw him out. I didn't need to, because I had already left him, in my heart, in my soul. The moment I saw those messages, the rest was just paperwork. I'm not broken, I told him. I'm not some abandoned woman begging for your return. I stepped closer, and for the first time in weeks, I looked him in the eye. But I am done. He nodded slowly, the weight of consequences finally sinking into the bones. We stood there, not as wife and husband, not even as enemies, but as survivors of a love that had set itself on fire. He whispered a final, I'm sorry. And I believed him. But that didn't make it better. It just made it real. Weeks passed. He moved out quietly, left behind a drawer full of forgotten ties and a shelf of old colognes I now couldn't stand the smell of. I deleted the photos, canceled the anniversary dinner reservation, stopped wearing my ring. And yet, I didn't fall apart. I didn't turn bitter. I rebuilt. Not with revenge. Not with rebound flings, but with rediscovery. One evening I ran into his boss, the man who had unknowingly dropped the first stone into the still waters of my ignorance. He looked uncomfortable, hesitant. I didn't mean to start anything, he said. I thought you already knew. I smiled. Genuinely. Thank you, I told him. You didn't break anything. You just turned the lights on. Now I live in a place by the sea, small, quiet, honest. And every morning I walk barefoot along the shore, letting the cold waves remind me that I am still here, still whole. Sometimes I remember the love we had, and I don't curse it. It was real, even if it didn't last. But I no longer carry the weight of what he did, because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it's the silence you choose after the storm, the peace you reclaim, the life you rebuild with both hands.